Okay. Ready?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming today to the Standards Committee. Thank you. First of all, if I could call for any apologies being noted, please.
No apologies today, Chair.
Thank you. And do we have any disclosures for personal prejudicial interest at all? Anybody note? No. Thank you. The first person that we're going to meet as part of our annual meeting with the political group leaders is Mr. Chris Holly. Good morning to you.
Good morning, all.
Good morning. Would you care for me to ask our Standards Committee to introduce themselves to you, Chris, please?
That's fine, Jill. Not a problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, if I could hand over then, if I may, please, to Tracy.
Yes, Councillor Holly, we have two questions that the committee wish to ask of you. The chair is going to read those questions to you. We have an allotted time of 20 minutes, Chris, just so that you're aware of that. And obviously there may be some supplementary questions as well that the committee may wish to ask you arising under the two questions that we have. But there's the same two questions for all group leaders, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The Local Government and Elections Wales Act provides the leaders of political groups that they must take reasonable steps to promote and maintain high standards of conduct by the members of their group. We are interested to hear as to what actions you take now in terms of maintaining the standards within your own group, and how are you proposing to meet the new duty going forward? That was question number one, please, Chris.
I think it's a very difficult question to answer because of the various problems that you do come across within political groups. I think I'm not sure what other leaders will tell you, but I think it's really down to what the issues are and how you deal with it. It's, for instance, you know, there is party whips, which, to be perfectly honest, we in the Liberal Democrats and the Independent group, we don't bother with it, you know. So in that respect, we are, if you like, a group of people who are elected to represent our particular areas, and we think that's far more important than, you know, if there's a particular subject that you're all told you've got to vote for. You know, that is not something which, to be perfectly honest, we foster. So there are issues, and you know, there are issues about individuals, and you have to take every issue as a separate one, and you deal with people in different ways, because at the end of the day, most elected representatives are very strong-willed anyway. They wouldn't be there if they weren't. And I think it's a question of what the issue is and how you deal with it. So I don't think there is a simple answer to that question, to be honest with you, Chair. You know, it's not as if, you know, you're suspending them from the group. I don't see that as an issue, really. So I say it depends on what the issue is, and it depends on the seriousness of it, and it depends on how you deal with it. So as I say, I don't think there's a very simple, easy answer to that question.
Okay, have you had an opportunity, I know it hasn't been rolled out yet, but the actual key findings and recommendations that have gone to Welsh Assembly, have you had a chance to read that yet?
I've had a quick read over them, and I find that I'm not quite sure how and why they've brought these type of regulations in, because in my 30 odd years, I've only ever come across one issue within a political party, and wasn't ours, but it was someone else's, where there was a warrant of warranted any sort of action. So I'm a bit concerned about why it has been brought in now. I think some of it is to do away with the complaints procedure to the Ombudsman, and to make that a bit more streamlined, so it's more serious, if you like. And some of the other issues, which I find a bit perplexing, really. It seems to me as if the Welsh Government are saying, well, we want you to be self-regulating, but they don't come and they don't. It's not clear what they're saying in there. I think it's a bit ambiguous.
Right, okay. Thank you for. I know it is a difficult question to answer, but really that's the point of asking what
Yes.
or your comprehension and how going forward the particular members under your guidance will know why this has been brought about. And I think really amending the code in order to suit the modern world that we now are working in is very different, isn't it, Chris? Very different.
It is totally different to when I first got elected, where there were far stricter protocols, for the want of a better term, and you had a lot more. You didn't do as much, if I'm honest. You had a lot more secretarial support, and you had a lot more support in if you wanted to know anything, there was always lots of people around. The world has changed a lot, and you have to do a lot more yourself. And as a result, you can possibly get into a few more problems. And as a result of that, you've got to be a bit more careful what you do. And I think to some extent, one of the processes of selecting people for election is why we've gone through that process now, which is far more vigorous than it used to be in the past. So you don't, in the past, you could, if somebody put their hand up, they wanted to stand, well, that was fine. But now you've got to really make sure that the person at stand hasn't got baggage or hasn't got a history that could cause problems. And I think that's part of the role of the leader of any group, is to make sure before the person gets elected, you haven't got the issues that you might have afterwards. So I think that's part of it. It is a totally different world to 30 odd years ago. And as a result, everybody's more connected. There are all these fancy media platforms, and it's very easy to get into a lot of problems very, very quickly. So I think I can understand to some extent why the Assembly or the Welsh Government want to do this. But I think it's down primarily, you should verify the person you're selecting to stand as a, if you like, that's the gatekeeper to how that person will react when they're elected.
I note under one of the recommendations under the Code of Conduct, it says making it a requirement to make the Code of Conduct training mandatory. So I think that's the whole point, is as the leader, as you rightly said, it's how that person understands the Code of Conduct within the overall responsibilities. Because so many times, as you said, particularly with social media, you're reacting to something perhaps without having the gatekeeper giving you best advice, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the issue also is that you have to realise, I think, that as you say, the world has moved on, and as such, people's attitudes have moved on as well. And it's that the issue again, which is primarily should be in the forefront of any decisions that you make, is what effect what you're saying or what you're doing is going to have in the wider public opinion. And I think that's again an issue which, if you look at the Code of Conduct, I think that's part and parcel of what is coming out of the Code of Conduct, is how you treat others as well. And I think as part of a group and as elected individuals, you've got to be very mindful of that. And I think that's one of the things that the code of conduct, when the training of the code of conduct is conducted, part and parcel of that should be about respect, and respect for all people, and whatever they creed or whatever they colour, whatever it is. And that is something which is totally different to what it was for 30 odd years ago. And now that has changed dramatically, and that has got to be part and parcel of anyone that you select these days. Just has to have that sort of respect.
Absolutely. Thank you. Can I just go to our question 2, if I may, Chris?
Yeah.
The Standards Committee also has new functions under this Act to ensure that group leaders have access to advice and training to support their new duties and to monitor group leaders' compliance with those duties. Is there any support that you feel would be beneficial, either from the Standards Committee, the Chief Executive, the Monitoring Officer, in carrying out your duty, and whether in any way we can assist you with that duty, please, Chris?
I'm not sure about training, but I think advice is all. The person that doesn't accept advice is a fool, and I think that's the thing that you've got to, you know, which is always welcomed, is advice. And I think advice from the Standards Committee, I think once a year meeting you is probably too little. I think at least twice a year to monitor what's going on, how we performing, and how individuals are behaving, and how you as a Standards Committee perceive the operation of the council. So I think the first thing I'd say is that twice a year meeting with the Standards Committee would probably be beneficial, the feedback from yourselves about how we as councillors are. And I think the only other thing is that I think with the code of I think the ready advice is the best thing. Having advice as readily available is the best thing, to be honest. And a meeting with you and twice a year to get feedback from yourselves.
So just to go back on what you said then, of having the confidence to seek the advice, do you not think that the understanding perhaps of the new role of the Code of Conduct, if you've got as far as asking the question, would that not suggest that in some way it's your interpretation, and perhaps because we've got the local Swansea issue, haven't we, whereby you can take things locally and get it, do dispute resolution. And I think that in many ways, in the time that I've been party to the standards, I think it's been a very worthwhile tool insofar as people realise that they have to be aware and take it locally before escalating it. So I just wondered, from these new rules and regulations, if people are more aware of what they should and shouldn't be perhaps expressing, therefore it won't get to the point where the leader needs to take advice. Or do you think that you would be calling on that more so than you've done before?
I don't think so. Again, it comes back to the selection of candidates and who the candidates are, and how you actually address those candidates. And I think also people do understand. I think there is a greater understanding of the Code of Conduct now than there's been in the past. So I don't think necessarily you're going to need more, advice more often. But I think I think it's that feedback is better, to understand what people think of what we do. And I think the reason the version that we have in Swansea, where we try and sort problems out before they go anywhere and any complaints go anywhere else, has worked. But there have been so few that I know of anyway, that we haven't seen the volume we had back in the early 2000s, when every other week we were having issues with the ombudsman and what have you. So we haven't had that number, and the few that have been in the last 4 years, I think we've had a couple, but we've settled them locally, which is far better than going anywhere else.
No, absolutely right. Yeah, I would recommend that, absolutely.
I can't hear you, sorry.
No, I was just saying I would support what you're saying, absolutely. It's made a huge difference to the reports that come about Swansea, which makes us very proud, actually, for me personally.
Yeah, I don't, you know, as far as I'm concerned at the moment, I can't think of, sorry?
No, I'm just going to say, is there anybody of our standards committee that would wish to raise any questions? Have you got anybody, please? Oh, Mike Lewis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Councillor Holly. I hope you can see and hear me okay.
Yeah.
Good morning. I just want to come back to the first question, if I may, very quickly. If I paraphrase what I think I've heard, the thrust of your reply, it was get the selection process right for the candidates in the first place and understand them, that you've got the right people in place. I think you rightly highlighted we haven't had many issues on the authority, certainly in my time on the committee, and therefore the last couple of years. So that's fine. And I think then the main thrust of your further response to question 1 was around, well, it depends on the circumstances, depends on the individual. I suppose it would be helpful for the committee to understand just quickly what your understanding is of the various approaches you could take. I know it's a bit theoretical, because you say, it would depend. Just a quick overview of what you think the various approaches you could take as group leader, please.
Right, I think the ultimate sanction is normally to suspend someone from the group and take them off various committees. That is probably the ultimate sanction. Between then that and many, well, my own preference is to take them into a room and give them a good talking to. I can be quite sarcastic, if you like, or I can be quite forceful with my discussions with people, and invariably it doesn't need to go any further than that. If it needs to go further than that, then it's something quite serious, and then then, as I say, you remove people from various committees or suspend them from the group. But to be perfectly honest with you, I haven't got to that stage. Over the years, I've had some very difficult characters, very difficult. And what I've found is that once you actually start confronting people with their issues, 9 times out of 10, you can deal with that problem.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Holly.
Did anybody else wish to ask a question, please? Can't see anybody's hand up. No. Well, may I thank you for, and also the fact that you see value in having another scheduled meeting, because obviously we were pleased to have the first meetings, and that was introduced, I think, about 3 years ago. And as a standards committee, I find that very, very helpful. So to think that you consider it also to the point where you would welcome even a second one within a term is lovely. So thank you very much. Thank you.
I do, Chair. I think it's always good to have a peer, to have a review and have someone outside of the, if you like, the political circle look in and tell us what they think, because you can't improve unless you're prepared to listen and ask. And I think one of the things we need to do is, always try and improve on what we're doing. And I think the way to do it is to ask people like yourselves and the rest of the Standards Committee for their views and how we react and how we act in public. And I think it's very, very important that we ask that. And I do value a conversation with the Standards Committee, because I think it's really important.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to hear. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you for your time. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Holly.
Okay. Thank you all. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Chris.
So Councillor Holly is left, and the next group leader will be the leader, Councillor Rob Stewart, at 9:55.
Where's the time on the screen?
It's 9:51 now.
Oh, okay, thank you. I thought that went very well.
Shall I see if I can bring him in early?
I was just going to say, do you want me to try and call him in?
Go on now.
Might not be possible.
Yeah, just calling him now.
Are all these conversations recorded? They are.
All this is live. Oh yeah, just to remind you, all this is live now. So just be mindful.
Yeah, Councillor Stewart's with us now.
Good morning, Chair. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning. I can't see you yet.
Morning, Rob.
Oh, yes, sorry, I can see you. Good morning to you. I'm not sure whether or not, Rob, that you would wish to be introduced to the members of our Standards Committee. Would you like to know who is part of it, or do you already know them?
I know most, but I would be grateful for an introduction. That'd be wonderful.
Thank you. Okay, if I could start then, please, with Philip. Phil?
Phil, you're on mute.
Phil Crayford, Community Councillor, Llangefellach.
Mike?
Which one, Chair?
Mike, you. Thank you.
Me? Okay. Good morning, Councillor Stewart. I'm sometimes known as the other Mike Lewis, as opposed to Councillor Mike Lewis. I'm one of the independent members.
And Graham Thomas, please.
Morning, Rob. Graham Thomas, Cabot Ward.
Morning, Graham.
Morning.
And Oliver.
Hey, Rob. Oliver here. We'll copy it.
And Margaret.
Good morning, I'm Margaret Williams and I'm one of the independent members.
Hi, Margaret.
Morning.
And Michaela, please.
Hello, I'm Michaela Jones, an independent member. Good morning.
Morning, Michaela.
And then obviously Councillor Mike Lewis, which I'm sure you know.
Morning, Rob.
Morning, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much. The purpose of today actually is that once a year we decide to meet with the leaders and really with the view to perhaps asking and understanding from our point of view and equally from your point of view. So we have two questions of which if I could ask you the first one, Rob, please, if I may.
Yep.
Question one, the Local Government and Elections Wales Act provides that leaders of political groups must take reasonable steps to promote and maintain high standards of conduct by the members of their group. We are interested to hear as to what actions you take now in terms of maintaining standards within your own group, and how are you proposing to meet the new duty going forward, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I guess there are two parts to what we do. Obviously, there's the more corporate side, which obviously you'll no doubt know applies to all members. But I'd focus firstly on what we do as a political party and as a political group in order to maintain standards. Obviously, one of the things that we do is prior to people even being considered for being a candidate. So we obviously have a vetting process for candidates. We ask questions in terms of people's backgrounds and life experiences, etc. And that happens at a very early stage before people are even considered to be a candidate for selection as a Labour councillor. In the period before elections or before selections, we embark upon a series of induction and training sessions where we help people understand what the life of a councillor is like and the sorts of challenges they may meet when they get elected. And it's reinforcing the principles, the Nolan principles, principles of public life, and preparing them to not be an ordinary citizen any longer, and that they therefore have a different and higher level of behaviour that they're expected to adhere to. And within that, we also go into things like how to deal with social media, how to ensure that they are aware of conflicts of interest, and all of the things that I think gets then repeated should they be elected, with democratic services and all the training that the council does to help people when they first get elected to council. So we take that very seriously. And then when people are elected, as a Labour group, obviously we organise as a political group. We ensure that we help and support our members through the whip system. So the whips have two key roles. One is supporting members, advising and helping them, but the other one is ensuring that members follow the rules. And if an incidence of indiscipline or concern arises, then we have a dedicated system within our political group where the whips will deal with that internally. We obviously on top of that then, when people get elected, they also sign up to a contract. So not just the councillor contracts that are signed as you become an elected member, but we also have a group contract that people sign, which again commits them to high standards of behaviour, high levels of probity, and a number of other things that we require them to do as a Labour councillor. So in that respect, I think even before the Act arrived, we had quite a comprehensive series of things that we did as a party to ensure that the candidates we choose, who we want to become councillors, are well prepared for that role and then adhere to the highest standards. In terms of, once people are elected, and in terms of operating between groups, I think, again, we have the new protocols in place where if issues arise in terms of conduct or concerns about members' behaviours, we use the internal processes, first of all, between group leaders, where one group leader will speak to another group leader to talk about issues, if any are raised. And this is a prelude, really, to a referral to the Ombudsman in terms of trying to enact better behaviours or deal with the issue at the earliest possible way. And we have used that process a couple of times over the last few years to try and deal with issues where perhaps behaviours have been just a bit outside of what we'd consider to be appropriate. So again, I think we've got quite a robust series of processes that we currently deploy.
Good. So in line then with what is already in place, really, the second question is, it's difficult insofar as what you're saying actually leads me to the effects as to the Standards Committee function, and therefore, do you think that group leaders have access to advice and training to support these new duties? Now, because obviously the Act has not been confirmed yet as being in place, I just wondered, do you feel then that moving on, you're likely to need to call upon the duty of whether we can assist you in any way? So that's the Standards Committee, the Chief Executive or the Monitoring Officer. Do you feel in any way we can support you?
Well, as you say, we were awaiting the guidance, and I'd hoped that would have been out by now, because it would have been helpful for our discussion today. But obviously, we don't have the benefit of it yet. But look, I mean, on one level, it'd be great if the Standards Committee had no work to do, and that meant everybody was behaving really well. But I think in terms of the Standards Committee, I've always welcomed advice and guidance and support from both the chair and the obviously the legal and monitoring officers to help us when we do have issues that arise, and that I would like to see that continue. I think one of the things, which I believe I've said a couple of times when we've had discussions around the standards for candidates and for councillors, The thing that still concerns me is that I'm aware that, you know, when you're part of a political party, you can rely on the party mechanisms and the party support to help you as a new candidate. Unfortunately, you know, when you're an independent, or if you decide to stand as an independent candidate for election, you don't have all of that. And, you know, the Ombudsman's remit and the code of conduct doesn't currently apply to candidates at the time they become candidates. It only applies once you become a councillor or an elected member. And I think that's something that needs to be rectified, because I believe that standards of behaviour should apply from the time your candidacy starts, and that should apply equally to all members. And I think it's a two part to that. It's about making sure those people who decide to stand as independents get the support that we can get from our party structures in another way, and they get the guidance in terms of behaviours and all of the other things, because I think that is one of the concerning things for me, is that sometimes in an election, if you're not standing as an already elected member seeking re-election, you're under a different set of rules to those candidates who may just be standing for the first time. And they may be doing stuff that they don't realise is not within the code of conduct, because they've never had the benefit of the training or the advice that we've had. So I think that is one of the ones I would hope that we could resolve, if not for this election, for future elections.
I was going to say, that's very interesting, because I wasn't aware that was the situation. So I'm not sure if anybody else from the standards group would like to ask any questions, please, the leader. No? Anybody? No. So if I just may ask a personal question then, in regards to when you said it's a pity this isn't in place ready for the elections that are coming up, but you're very mindful of the drawbacks that you already experienced.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll share, without naming names, I'll share with the committee that, you know, there are a number of councillors who have faced really difficult abuse and intimidation from certain individuals over the last few years, often around election times, and often people who have behaved very badly and in ways where we've had to involve the police, and then they subsequently turned out to be candidates closer to the election. Now, again, I think that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't give a good reflection of that, and certainly for elected members who, of course, are adhering to the code of conduct, are responding to some of those threats and intimidation. It's a very awful situation, and I think it's something that we all can do more to try and prevent. But I am worried about that happening in the forthcoming elections again.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything further that you would wish us from standards to perhaps discuss, or are you happy? You've answered the two questions that were set to all of the interviewees today, but I'm glad that you see value in these meetings.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. And as I said, you know, I do see value in the. It's not just the you know, the formal action that the committee sometimes may have to take, but it's that advice role that the Standards Committee can give, and I think that is a really valuable one, especially for group leaders, I think, and for people, because the leadership position can sometimes be a lonely position, and it's good to have people and the ability to seek advice and counsel sometimes.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you. Anybody else before we say goodbye to him? No? No. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so Councillor Stewart has now left the meeting, and the next group leader is Councillor Lyndon Jones, who's the group leader for the Conservatives, and we are due to meet him at 10:15 again. Alison, I'm not sure whether we are able to bring Councillor Lyndon Jones in earlier than we anticipated.
Yeah, I'll try and call him in now.
Thank you.
And when I'm doing I have the speaker as being the main picture, but you don't do that. You always keep all of the joining.
I can change it now.
It's just like I couldn't physically see what Rob was saying. I sort of.
I think I can be picked, but yeah, when you join, let me pin him.
So, but that's all right, I will say, because the others are still there then, but he's the main picture.
I can see. I do that. When
I don't know how to address
Could it hasn't sleep? Could everyone be able to?
I've tried to get Councillor Jones in, but he's not responding. So I've just sent him an email as well, just to say that we're ready for him. So perhaps he'll pick that up now.
Am I waiting?
Okay. So we just waiting a couple of minutes before he joins. I'll give him a ring on his mobile as well.
Yeah, I have emailed him.
Yeah, I didn't. Sorry, I didn't realise that.
Yeah, sorry. We're going to go back to the chair. Go to item 5.
Item 5, sorry.
So we're going to leave this item and return to it when Councillor Jones is ready to join.
Okay, we're going to then go to the All Wales Standards Conference. Item 5 brought forward.
Yeah, if I can just update the committee, at the last monitoring officer group meeting that we had shortly prior to Christmas, the monitoring officer for Gwynedd indicated that he was proposing to call an All Wales Standard Conference. Of course, it has been delayed for probably over 2 years now because of the pandemic. You'll note at the back of your papers at agenda item 5, the conference will take place virtually on the 9th of February between 10 and 4 p.m. The programme is attached. It does follow what we will go through in agenda item 4 in terms of the Richard Penn independent review of the ethical framework. So you see the programme that's set out there. I have been asked to bring it to your attention. I have an email address that should you be available to attend and wish to attend, you will have to email the council so that they can send you the link to join the meeting on the 9th of February. So can I ask that if you are able to attend and you wish to attend, that you email me and I'll send you the link so that you can actually register your attendance and make sure that you get the link to attend the standards conference. I think the focus, it looks as though the focus will be on the Richard Penn independent review.
Okay, and will that be done through a Teams access or a Zoom?
I'm not sure. I think they use Teams. They were using Zoom, so I'd need to check on that. But obviously, when you get the joining arrangements, it'll be quite clear to you.
Okay.
We now have Councillor Lyndon Jones has joined us. Thank you, Councillor. We are running ahead of schedule, so thank you for joining us early.
Good morning to you.
That's okay. Yeah. Great morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for attending. We haven't met before. My name is Jill Burgess. Would you like to have the introduction of the members of the Standards Committee, just to have a quick overview of who they are? Would you like that?
Yeah. That sounds great. I obviously know Mike, Oliver, and Graham, the 3 councillors.
In that case, then, if we could start off with Mike Lewis, the independent member. Mike?
Yes. Good morning, Councillor. I'm the other Mike Lewis, independent member.
Welcome. Yeah, good to meet you.
Morning.
And Margaret?
Good morning. I'm Margaret Williams and I'm also an independent member of the committee. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm not sure whether you would know Phil. Could you just quickly introduce yourself, Phil?
Yeah, Phil Crayford. I'm the town community and town council representative, and I represent the community council of Llangefelig.
Good to meet you.
That's everybody. Thank you. You said you knew everybody else.
Yeah, no, I do. Yes, yes.
My apologies, Michaela.
Hi there, my name's Michaela Jones. I'm an independent member. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you very much. The purpose of these meetings is really to have a conversation about how the standards perhaps can assist in any way, and equally it's for you to feel comfortable at knowing us if there are any queries that you might have. So we compiled 2 questions, not too difficult. If I may just run past you what this question is. Question 1 would be the local government and the Local Government and Elections Wales Act provides that leaders of political groups must take reasonable steps to promote and maintain high standards of conduct by the members of their group. We are interested to hear as to what actions you take now in terms of maintaining standards within your own group, and how are you proposing to meet the new standards going forward?
Okay, great. Well, to start with, I think as a group, the Conservative group, we signed up to the Swansea Pledge on Standards. Not all groups have done that, but we were really happy to do that, to go that extra mile, to make sure that we adhere to that, to the appropriate standards. I have to say the other thing is, of course, it's about respect, and it's about respecting members of your own group and also other groups and staff within the council. And I have to say we've had no instances so far with my group, so something must be working in that sense. I always take the view that you should treat people as you'd like to be treated yourself. And I think that's a very, very good base to start from. I think, we obviously within the group, when we have issues, we talk about them and how we are going to deal with them. So it's very much, good communication. And I think that is also a key element. The other thing is obviously moving forward. I discuss obviously things within the group, but also that would be for any new councillors that join us after May.
Can I just ask you, have you had a chance to at least look at any of the documentation which is going forward under the Code of Conduct? Have you had a chance to look?
Yeah, we look at. I think on this note that we had the guide, we're waiting for guidance, which so I haven't seen that, but yes, obviously looked at it, and it's something that I feel quite happy with. I think we should all work to a certain standard, and as I mentioned, we must, key word to that is respect. And respect not just people with not just councillors from all groups and ourselves, but also staff and that it goes without saying members of the public too.
Do you feel as part of introducing new candidates that needs to be expressed earlier or wait later? I just wondered, with elections coming up, do you do sort of an audit on what is expected before they're elected?
Well, I think it's important, for them, and I'd be, talking to candidates about what is expected and what, how to deal with, officers and so on. And one key criteria I always use when dealing with officers is always to say thank you. because not everybody does, and they work extremely hard on our behalf, and I think it's important, and I would stress that to councillors in the group too.
Good. Okay. The second question, if I may, please. The Standards Committee also has new functions under the Act to ensure that group leaders have access to advice and training to support their new duties and to monitor group leaders' compliance with those duties. Is there any support that you feel would be beneficial, either from the Standards Committee, the Chief Executive, the Monitoring Officer, in any way to help you carry your duty, and whether to assist you in any way?
Yeah, I think it's important that when we have new councillors, it's important for them to be appropriately trained, but also existing ones too, because you can always forget, and it is important to have a bit of a brush up. So I think that I would certainly welcome any support.
And you don't feel at all uncomfortable at coming and asking for the standards to give that support? That's basically, do you see us as being...
No, not at all. You should always be very, very keen to get assistance when you're talking about driving up standards, and I think who wouldn't?
Yes, absolutely. If I may, then I'm going to open up to the members of the standards and say if there's any questions that you'd like to ask Lyndon, please. Anybody putting a question forward? No.
If I can, Chair, please, if I can. Councillor Jones, do you do any formal sort of interviews before you elect a candidate to stand?
Yes, we do. There's a process that's set down by the party where obviously all would-be candidates are first vetted, and then they go through a process before they get onto a list, and then they're selected from that list. So yes, I'm one member on that panel, and obviously there are other people on that panel as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
That's very worthwhile. Anybody else got a question? No. No, can't see anything else. Thank you very much, Lyndon, for your time. I hope that you see value in the meeting for the leaders. We would always want to be seen as being as approachable and helpful to the roles, and particularly in line with the new codes of conduct, which we're all waiting to hear have been actually adopted. So I do thank you very much, and we'll meet you in another meeting. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Yeah, bye. Bye all.
Thanks, Lyndon.
Thank you, Lyndon.
Bye.
Okay, is he there?
Is he gone?
Yeah, I think Councillor Jones is now gone. Do you want me to go on to?
Yes, please. Agenda
item 4. Okay, so just moving on to agenda item 4. It is quite a hefty volume of a report, so I'm hoping that you've had an opportunity of reading it. I'm not proposing to go through it in any huge detail. Last year, Welsh Government commissioned Richard Penn, who is next Chief Executive in England, to undertake an independent review of the ethical standards framework to ensure basically that it remained fit for purpose. Its terms of reference and what it encompassed included consideration of the Code of Conduct, the role of the Standards Committee, the current sanctions available to both the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales and the Adjudication Panel for Wales, arrangements to support members and staff, and the effectiveness of the framework in fostering high standards of conduct across Wales. There were 2 phases of that review. The first phase was the initial engagement, and you'll see the list of consultees that are included in the report. I think they are found at page 16 through to page 18. They did include a number of Welsh Government officials and a number of monitoring officers and our monitoring officer group, which I was in attendance at. And then phase 2 of the review will focus on working with various partners and stakeholders to actually effect and implement the changes. Some of the changes will require changes to legislation, others are just changes to various policies and procedures. The overwhelming consensus was that the current framework is fit for purpose. It works well in practice and was viewed by many as superior to the English model. Richard Penn also found that with some minor adjustments, he was of the view that a lower number of complaints could be achieved and the need for formal investigations by both the Ombudsman and the adjudication panel for Wales could be reduced. As I say, his findings are quite detailed and are set out from page 32 of the agenda, but just highlighting a couple that you may be interested in. In terms of the model code of conduct, there were some recommended changes. A couple of those in particular were the requirement under the code for members to register any gifts or hospitality, which they're under a duty to do. The code doesn't actually specify a threshold, so you'll see in his report that the threshold ranges from somewhere between, I think it's £20 up to £100. In Swansea, it's currently £25, and Richard Penn has suggested that there is a consistent threshold, and that is specified in the code of conduct, which I think probably makes absolute sense. He also wished to bring it in line with the Local Government and Election Wales Act in terms of requiring members to publish an electronic and postal address for each member and not the home address of councillors. And as I think the leader touched on, that a number of councillors have been subject to quite a lot of abuse and intimidation, so not having to publish a home address would indeed help and assist in terms of ensuring councillors' personal safety. Also, it touches on the report for members to report to the Ombudsman if they're aware that another member has committed a criminal act, but he recommends that, and of course I think this follows logically, that if a member themselves is convicted of a criminal offence or is engaged in any criminal behaviour themselves, then they should have a duty on them to report themselves to the Ombudsman. He also talks about updating the code to make sure that it covers all the protected characteristics under the Equality Act, which at present it doesn't include all of those specific protected characteristics. He also has suggested, and again it's something I think you'll probably agree with, that it's worthwhile amending the code to include specific reference to social media obligations. The review also touches considerably on training and training duties for councillors. Richard Penn felt that training should be mandatory, and the simplest way to achieve that would be for members to sign up and to commit to undertake the necessary training when they sign their declaration of acceptance of office. The review also talks about training for Standards Committee members, not only in terms of what the code requires, but also in terms of training for undertaking specific hearings that are referred to the Standards Committee by the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales. And I just draw your attention, I think it's from page 37 onwards. It specifically talks about, and this is one thing that I have highlighted in terms of the recommendation as well for the committee, it does reference the forum for independent chairs of standards committees in North and Mid Wales. The suggestion is that whilst it might be quite useful to have a similar setup in South Wales, Richard Penn is of the view that it should be an all-Wales forum and recommends the re-establishment of the annual conference for independent chairs. So you will see I've put that on as a recommendation because I think it will probably be something that is discussed at the All Wales Standard Conference on the 9th of February. It is something that I do want to go back to the Monitoring Officer of Gwynedd just to say that I've taken this report to my Standards Committee on. You are supportive of that Count Wales suggestion. Just quickly then turning to page 38. Just wanted to highlight to you, because I think you will be interested in this, paragraph 4.46 of the report, where the Ombudsman has actually accepted that there is a need for more references back to the Standards Committee when he declines to investigate complaints. Richard Penn does talk about the technicalities of what that means would need to be considered, presumably as phase 2 of the review. But in addition, he considers that if that is to be accepted by Welsh Government, then the Standards Committee would presumably need additional powers, in particular to require members to undertake the necessary training, and also to make a recommendation that members actually apologise. And then finally, at page 40, I just draw your attention to paragraph 4.73, where there is discussion around the 2-stage test that the Ombudsman applies as to whether or not he's going to investigate a matter, and the view that is expressed there that the exercise of the Ombudsman discretion should be more towards a referral than at present, and that would be welcome. Councillor Crayford, I would also just draw to your attention, you've probably seen it in there, that the review does also encompass whether or not the creation of subcommittees specifically dedicated to community council and town council matters has been beneficial, but I think he found when he actually looked into it, there is only one council that does actually have a subcommittee, and that's on the basis, I can't remember the exact number, but I think the number is they have 124, 127 community councils to actually deal with, so that probably makes absolute sense in those circumstances. So that really is a quick tour through what is quite a comprehensive review of the ethical standards framework. I was pleased to see that the Always Standard Conference, Richard will be there, so you will have an opportunity to raise any questions that you may have with him and for a further discussion on the actual review. Quite interesting what the leader said this morning, I think, around there being no duty on candidates and specific problems that are sitting councillors and councillors restanding for election may face in terms of bullying and harassment from other candidates when they themselves are confined and constrained by acting within the code of conduct. So you might want to think as a committee that that's the sort of thing you might want to explore at the Standards Conference if there is the opportunity to do that. So happy to take any questions. Don't propose to say anything more. I think it is a very comprehensive report. There's a lot of good suggestions in there, I think. So happy to open it up to conversation by the Standards Committee.
Is there anybody who's got a question that want to ask Tracy?
Could I ask something, please? With regard to what you just said, Tracy, I picked up that I thought that point was really very interesting that Councillor Stewart made, but I just wondered, I mean, does the Standards Committee have any power to do anything about, I mean, he mentioned in particular independent candidates, but I mean, do we have any power to influence this, or does it just apply, you know, our powers apply really once people have been elected as councillors?
Yes, Councillor, yes, Margaret, your duties don't extend to dealing with candidates for election. That's would have to be put into place through electoral legislation, or maybe you know, another separate piece of legislation. But your duties are quite clear, your powers and your role is specifically in terms of the elected members and compliance with the code of conduct and maintaining those high ethical standards. But it only applies to elected councillors.
That's what I thought. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, he was reminding me, and co-opted members, yes.
Yourselves, yeah.
Anybody else got a question for Tracy? Oh, sorry, Mike Lewis, independent.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question really. I suppose it's a bit of a response and an acknowledgement. I think the first thing to say is I just want to acknowledge the report and to welcome it. To pick up on the question that Margaret's just raised, you're right, the leader did make a very valid point in my view, but I recognise, Tracy, we have no jurisdiction at the moment. But to square that circle, isn't this the opportunity for review is happening? It's beyond our powers to put that in place. But I would just wonder, Chair, if this is our opportunity to at least influence the debates. I think, you know, that there is a gap there. We can't currently close it, but others could, and perhaps this review is an opportunity to do that. I can't actually personally make the Always conference. I'm afraid I've got a private commitment. but you would expect me, Chair, would you not, to welcome the acknowledgement of the Ombudsman in the report that there is a greater role to play by standards committees. So I would specifically want to welcome that. You know, we've said it many times. I've certainly said it a number of times. So I welcome the acknowledgement that there is a further role or a larger role for the standards committees to play.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. Yes, it's interesting. I felt that the criteria set for the new members of standards, that we will be required to undertake training. But equally so, I think that part of the candidates, when they sign up, they should also be made to have the awareness of what the codes of conduct are, if you see what I mean. Because if we as standards representatives will be required to undertake training, then equally I think those that we're taking into the system should undertake to be aware of the codes of conduct so that they know how to match it.
And just Chair on that, it is one of the first training that new councillors will, and old councillors actually, will have to undertake once they're elected and sign the declaration. So we have been working with our Democratic Services Committee in terms of an induction programme. Hugh has been very heavily involved in that, where we have a list of training that members have to undertake, and that will be slotted in with relevant officers giving that training. But I can reassure you the Code of Conduct training is one of the most important pieces of training they will have.
Well, I'm really, from a personal point of view, I'm really, really pleased. Absolutely, yeah. Anybody else want to ask Tracy? So yes.
So can I just come in? So there is a recommendation on this report, and as I've referred to, there is a suggestion in the report that we do create a Pan Wales National Forum for independent chairs of standards committees. So if you are agreeable to that, we will take a quick show of hands in terms of the recommendations of the report. But just to say that at the All Wales Standards Conference, you will have noted that Welsh Government will be in attendance, and Welsh Government will be presenting their response to this particular review. So that is the next stage, really, where Welsh Government will respond to the review, and we'll have a further idea then as to what will need to take place to implement the ethical standards framework, the review of the ethical standards framework, because some of it may be quite complicated in terms of having to change the legislation. So, Chair, if you're happy to take a vote on the recommendations, they are set out at page 1 of the papers. There are two recommendations. The first recommendation is to note the report, but if you are supportive of that creation of a national forum, I can go back to my counterpart in Gwynedd and tell him that you have voted on it and you are in support of it.
Okay, if I could ask you to do a show of hands, please. In support. Phil.
I can't see Phil.
Phil Creve.
Can you see all
that's
the hands?
everybody.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
One more thing. Sorry, can I just highlight the date of the next meeting is Friday, the 18th of March. We will need to change that meeting and probably bring it forward. There is one group leader that we haven't had an opportunity of interviewing because he couldn't make the meeting today. So we would like to try and afford him the opportunity to appear in front of the Standards Committee. We will try and bring that meeting forward. It is that meeting, the 18th of March, we will be going into what we call a pre-election period. So we are trying to reduce the number of committees that we actually have taking place during the period 18th of March to the date of the local government election. So we will try and bring that forward depending on the availability of the remaining group leader. And if there's anything further I need to bring to you, I'll make sure it goes to that report, that committee as well.
Will there be an opportunity at that meeting? I'm not suggesting that we will have questions for those that attend the meeting in February for the adoption of this paper. You know, you said that we could be party to it. I just wondered if there's anything comes back to you of comment, that was all.
No, but following the decision now on the Pan Wales meeting, I'll go back to my counterpart in Gwynedd. I'll confirm that you're agreeable to that. We won't have a standards committee prior to the All Wales standards.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean that. I meant the meeting of the 18th. If there was anything that was being raised after going,
we'll be bringing that meeting will come forward, and the on the agenda we'll have the remaining group leader for interview. If there is anything you want to pick up following the conference, we can possibly agenda that.
That's all I wanted to know. For those that want to be interested, do they have the opportunity to bring it to you? Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. I believe that's the total of the meeting. Yes. Unless otherwise. So I'd like to thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.